Good morning. As we gather together here, let's begin by singing number 545, Here I Am, Lord. And we're pretty much all in, so please rise with us to sing. And we will continue with an old but lovely hymn, When We Walk in the Lord, Trust and Obey. Number 570.
Welcome. Welcome. We're glad that you are here worshiping with us today at Waterloo North. Today we're focusing on finding God on holy ground. Now is the time of seasons changing, transitioning into fall. Let's look and listen for the ways the Lord speaks to us during these transitions.
The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right to give him thanks, praise, and praise.
Now we'll do a time of introductions. Gordon will walk around with the mic. Feel free to introduce yourself or someone you have brought with you.
It is with great delight that I introduce my stepchildren and step-grandchildren from Farmington Hills, Michigan, about 3 miles west of Detroit. They are as follows. Carl Cressman, Daniel Cressman, Sharon Cressman, and Mitchell Cressman.
My name's Bev Suderman Gladwell. I'm delighted to welcome another Suderman to the area. My niece, Kara Suderman, has just moved into our home, going to be studying at Laurier this year, just a 20-minute walk from our place, doing a graduate degree in history. So, Kara Suderman.
From Winkler. Now we'll move on to a time of announcements. I have heard from Gordon, Carmen, Dawn, and Colin. If they can please make their way up to the front.
Next Sunday is Gathering Sunday, and worship again will be at 10 o'clock, and it'll be followed by a potluck, so I emphasize and underline the potluck. You know what the holiday is tomorrow. It's Labor Day, so that makes today Labor Sunday. And after the service, with your generous help, we're going to be clearing out the sanctuary because it's going to be, the carpets will be cleaned on Tuesday. So we need to first take all the hymn books out. There's a couple of carts that put them on there, or you can put them on the stage, either one. And then we'll stack the chairs on either side of the sanctuary. So if you can do that immediately after the service, that would be wonderful. And equipment in the corner needs to come up on the stage too. So thank you.
Summer must be coming to an end because there are more announcements now. Forming lives of deep faith is integral to our calling as a church community. We seek to be a part of our children's encounters with God in meaningful, authentic, and lasting ways. This happens in many ways, including through worship and relationship. We recognize that how we attend to faith formation evolves. This is always the case, and this fall we want to try 2 new things that have emerged out of conversation with families in the spring and in consultation with ministry team, worship committee, and nurture committee. So we would like to bring the tables that have been in the fellowship hall into the sanctuary this fall so that people around the tables can feel more a part of what's happening in worship and people in the sanctuary can feel their presence. The tables will be an area to quietly engage with worship activities. We also invite children and junior youth, if they would like to help, to go to the back Sunday school room during the sermon time for a more active worship and prayer activity related to the morning service. So after the sermon then, during the hymn of response, we will come back into the sanctuary for the rest of worship. So 2 changes that we would like to start next Sunday. This holy experiment will be on a trial basis. And again, we have had conversations with families, with nurture, worship, and ministry team. We hope we will create opportunity to encounter God in joyful worship and community and hope that we continue to grow lives of vibrant, living faith. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to talk with me. If you want to help volunteer with this alternative sermon time, please talk with me. You can also talk with Monica Scheifele and Anastasia Liebold as Nurture Committee co-chairs, who also facilitated that conversation with families. So we're grateful for you, for this faith community who continues to nurture faith in creative and faithful ways.
Uncle Gord needs you. Uncle Gord needs you. The celebration of Gordon's retirement will include a talent show and open mic experience like none other. You are going to share your stories or your music or maybe a skit. Tell something irreverent about the Reverend, and we will do that all the evening before Gordon's retirement day. So please plan to have something ready. You don't need to tell me ahead of time, but if you do, we would maybe have a bit more of an agenda set out. And looking forward to seeing you all there to celebrate with Gordon.
Gordon already covered what I had to say about the chairs. I'll just recap. Books up on the stage, chairs either side, and I'd suggest stacking some of them in stacks of 3 so you can carry them. And we'll only have one little cart for the stacks of 6. But if you make stacks of 6 and stacks of 3, we'll sort it out.
Thank you for those announcements. Now for the call to worship. This place for us is holy ground, the place where we sing songs of praise to the Lord and repeat the stories of our faith that inspire us to respond to Christ's love. God has called us here in whispering winds and burning flames, and with his presence disarms us of the barriers that we have placed around us. Let us worship the Lord.
Please join us in the confession. For turning our eyes from the pain of the world and neglecting to offer the healing we are able. For the hidden hurts we hold too tightly and the promises we do not keep.
God, by your grace, forgive us.
For all that we could be and all that we can amend.
God, in your love, renew us.
For all that you may require of us.
God, in your love, prepare us.
Please join us with the words of assurance. Hear and trust these words of Jesus. Your sins are forgiven. I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. Come and follow me.
Thanks be to God.
So please turn to number 223, Blessed Be the God of Israel. Let's rise and sing.
Can any children or childlike persons please come to the front? And we've got chairs at the front. Oh, we got a child. Yay. Come on up to the front. This is awesome. Welcome. Now, am I going to be able to get back up? And you're fine to get up. Good morning. Awesome. This is great. Last Sunday, Gordon told us about Moses' beginnings. Remember the story, him in the basket down the river? Well, we're going to continue the story as Moses is an adult. So let's see what God has in store for him. Moses was out tending his father-in-law's flock of sheep, right? And he normally passes by bushes like this. Nothing unusual, right? He sees those every day.
What if this happened to the bush?
Excellent.
It was on fire, and the bush did not burn up at all. Would this catch your attention?
Yeah, it would. So Moses, being curious, went over to investigate, right? And then God called to him, Moses, from the burning bush, said, Moses, take off your shoes.
Shoes protect our feet, but they can also serve another purpose. Raise your hand if you take off your shoes when you're inside. Why should Moses take off his shoes? When do you take off your shoes?
To dance? Very good. Too confining? What else? Yeah? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Very good. Yep. What about if you go into somebody's house that you really like? You take off your shoes at their house? Yeah. It's sort of a sign of respect.
Respect means to show someone that you think that person is important, and God is very important.
God said that Moses was on holy ground. So Moses took off his shoes as a sign of respect. So let's take off the shoes here. And if you can. Okay.
To get ready to hear about Moses, let's take off our shoes if you are able. We think that may help us to understand why God told Moses to take off his shoes.
Now, God had a really important job for Moses. So he used the burning bush to get his attention, and he told him to take off his shoes for a sign of respect. God wanted Moses' full attention for his instructions. At first, Moses was confused. Was God talking to me? God wanted Moses to lead his people out of Egypt. But Moses wasn't sure he was the right person for the job. But God reassured Moses that he would be with him throughout this journey. Just like Moses, God speaks to us. Not as exciting as the burning bush, but he does speak to us.
Let us close with a prayer. God, thank you for giving us instructions. Thank you for speaking to Moses and for speaking to us. Help us to remember to listen to you and have the courage to act. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us. You may go back to your seats.
Don't forget your shoes.
Now, the next time I have an opportunity to do a congregational prayer, I'll feel disrespectful for wearing my shoes. During COVID, we stopped passing a plate, and for much of COVID pandemic time, we were not here, but we're at home. And the ritual of collecting an offering, it's been awkward working it back into our service. So now it's lumped with the congregational prayer. And personally, I think of those kind of differently. So when I see in the thing that says offertory and congregational prayer, I'm never quite sure what to do. So let's start with an offertory acknowledgement. Many of us give online now, and we thank God for our ability to do so. There's also a plate at the back that accepts donations, and we thank you for putting contributions there that help sustain the ministries of this congregation. What we want to do now, though, in worship is acknowledge in a significant way that all that we have comes from God. And what we give back is just a token, not just a token, is an important token of our acknowledgement that it is God who blesses us with time and with energy and with health and with money and asks us to use those things for the furtherance of God's kingdom. And for that, we are exceptionally grateful. Now we're going to do a time of congregational prayer, and Gordon has the microphone. Since we are a smaller group, I hope that there's the intimacy for people to raise their hand and share a prayer concern with the congregation. And Gordon will bring you the mic if he sees your hand up.
So this morning I want to thank God for a great summer season at Silver Lake, and having spoken a little bit with Johnny Weidman over at Fraser Lake, Willow Grove, and also with Chris Pott from Hidden Acres, it sounds like it was overall a great season for camps all over. So I also want to thank all of you for your prayerful support of camp. I wish you could all be there to see the children laughing and growing and flourishing in the camp environment.
For camps and summer ministries, Lord, in your mercy.
For those starting school this week, maybe new, maybe not for the first time, those taking new steps in the journey that is their lives, help us to be strong, help us to learn, help us to grow, help us to make friends.
For all those beginning a new academic year, Lord, in your mercy. I have some prayer requests from the congregation to share. We are very grateful, as our announcement said, for the completion of Sharon's radiation, the successful completion, and we are grateful to God. And she and Dave are grateful to this congregation for meals and prayers and support. We also pray for Buk Hee Kim and Suk Young Park, who were part of this congregation about a decade ago, and significantly so, and now live in South Korea. And it's a time of tension there, and we've been asked as a national church to keep them in prayer. So for Buk Hee Kim and Suk Young Park, Lord, in your mercy. We pray with Laverne and Elizabeth. Elizabeth has been hospitalized and requests our prayers for both of them. For Laverne and Elizabeth, Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. God, help us realize that here we are on holy ground, and wherever we are on this earth that you have entrusted to our care, we are on holy ground. Make us aware of that even more so, and fill us with joy with the acknowledgement that what is around us is indeed holy and worthy of praise. This weekend in particular, we are grateful for labor and laborers. We thank you for employment. We thank you for those who grow the food that we eat and confess that we often take it for granted. For those who manufacture the goods that we consume and the goods that we use and the machines and the automobiles and all of the rest. God, we thank you for laborers and for all that they do. We are very grateful, God, for this community of faith and for this opportunity to worship. And for both of these things, we give you thanks. Amen.
Let's now turn to number 596. Don't be afraid. Please rise. We'll sing it through twice.
Okay, so the reading is from Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 to 15. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the chief of the Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, and yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burning. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land of flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppressed them, so now I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And he said, "I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain." But Moses said to God, "If I come to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." He said further, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'I am has sent me to you.'" God also said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, 'The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you.' This is my name forever, and this my title for all generations."
So let's sing number 193, When Israel Was in Egypt's Land. Go down, Moses. Tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Please rise.
People Good morning. I know I'm nervous because I've just had my Fitbit a little while and my normal pulse runs about 50, and it was 80 this morning, so I said, take deep breaths, take deep breaths. So I hope that I've spent a number of weeks working on this sermon, and it's always a challenge to try to figure out the right balance, so I hope these words will be life-giving. In my reflections today, I will be drawing on a combination of my own research, reading, and reflecting, the Believer's Commentary on Exodus by Waldemar Jansen, and an online discussion of scholars on the book of Exodus. For the sake of not weighing down the sermon too much with references, I won't credit every idea, but if you want more information or details, you can ask me about that. Our passage today focuses on the call of Moses at the burning bush. The setting of the story is just after the narrator has Moses settled in Midian, and just before he and Aaron will confront Pharaoh with the demand that the Hebrews be allowed to worship God in the desert, and all that follows that request. While there is a lot that could be probed in this passage, I want to focus my comments today around three aspects of the story. 1, Moses' marginal status. 2, how paying attention helps us to truly see, and how God used Moses' attentiveness to both call him to a task. And 3, the name God reveals to Moses. I also have some props. For me, this passage raises a lot of intriguing questions, which I do not have all the answers to, or many of the answers to, but which I hope will provide some food for thought. Before I get to the passage itself, though, I want to briefly set it up and situate it within the canon and the larger story of Israel. The book of Genesis, meaning origins, is the first book of the Tanakh for Jews, or Hebrew Bible, and the Bible for Christians. It is also the first book of the Torah, or 5 books of Moses, known by Christians as the Pentateuch. Genesis provides the opening narrative, beginning with the shaping of the earth from darkness and chaos into meaningful order. It then focuses on the fall of humanity, the flood, and the Tower of Babel. In chapter 12, the focus narrows to a particular people with the call of Abraham and the story of his family, and concludes with the Joseph story, which includes his reconciliation with his brothers and the reunion with his father Jacob, the settlement of the descendants in Egypt, and the deaths of both Jacob and Joseph. Exodus picks up the story where Genesis leaves off. A very different book, it is known for 2 things: the flight of the Hebrew people from the Pharaoh's oppressive policies in Egypt, and the giving of the law at Sinai, so liberation and covenant. For Jews, the tradition of the Exodus event, expressed as liberation from oppression in Egypt, is central to their formation as a people and to their faith. It is also significant as a text for others in situations of oppression. Because of this universal and timeless quality, it serves as a living story in which people can continue to participate and see themselves. For example, as we saw in the last hymn, the enslaved Africans and their descendants drew on this story to draw hope from it. As Walter Brueggemann has observed, one might think of it as a paradigmatic history. The Hebrew title of the book, Shemo, these are the names, follows the ancient Semitic practice of naming a book by its opening words. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household. The English title, Exodus, comes from the Greek ex hodos, meaning the road or way out, and reflects the focus of the first part of the book, liberation. Today we will be focusing on what happens just before the Exodus itself, Moses' call to lead the people out. Exodus begins by telling the reader that although Joseph and his family were initially highly favored by the Egyptian ruling dynasty, over time things began to deteriorate. A Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, chapter 1, verse 8, began to oppress the Hebrews, who became part of the slave labor force, working as brickmakers in the Nile Delta. In an initial attempt to reduce their population, Pharaoh increases their workload. When this fails, he instructs the Hebrew midwives to kill all male infants, but they defy the order. Moses will become the hero of the story by leading the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt. However, as in any good story, the hero cannot become who he needs to be without experiencing his own trials. The first of these is to survive his infancy. Moses' mother decides to hide him in the Nile River, among the reeds, in a basket floating. Watched over by his sister Miriam, when he is found by the Pharaoh's daughter, Miriam slyly asks whether Her Highness would like to have a Hebrew wet nurse. In this way, while Moses is raised by Pharaoh's daughter, he is cared for by his biological mother. So Moses grows up with a dual identity, what we might today refer to as a third culture kid, what missionary kids or indigenous kids or others who grow up outside their native culture experience, never fully fitting into either their own culture or the one they grew up in. I know, I'm married to one. Moses' marginal status is also evident in the way he references the Hebrews as the Israelites, as if he is not one of them. Often it is those who are on the margins who can offer the appropriate perspective and critique in a culture. This position comes with both advantages and disadvantages, though, and it is not an easy place to sit. Moses' name reflects this dichotomy of having one foot in each world. Moshe is likely of Egyptian origin, derived from the same root, child of, as the pharaohs Tutmoshe and Ahmoshe, but has been given a Hebrew interpretation in the story, to draw out of water. As such, Moses is perfectly suited for the task he will undertake, being fluent in both Hebrew and Egyptian culture and language. Moses' second trial occurs when he reaches adulthood and kills an Egyptian whom he observes mistreating a fellow Hebrew. Fearing his action has become known, he flees to Midian. Now we're in Midian. In the story, just before Moses encounters God at the burning bush, he is sitting near a well, where he witnesses some shepherds harassing several young women who are attempting to draw water for their animals. The women turn out to be the 7 daughters of the Midianite priest Jethro, who we will see again in Exodus 18, advising Moses when his role as a judge for the community has worn him out. After coming to their defense, Moses finds himself a very welcome guest in Jethro's home, and eventually the husband of Jethro's daughter, Zipporah. There is substantial archaeological evidence of Midianite presence in the area of the Sinai in the late 13th to early 12th centuries BCE, when many scholars would place these events historically and culturally. The Midianites were caravanners who controlled the aromatics trade in the area. In fact, scriptural evidence has been uncovered that indicates the Midianite people also worshipped a god with the name Yahweh. This may explain why Moses' first revelation of Yahweh's name occurs in Midian. More on the name shortly. One day, while Moses is shepherding Jethro's flock in the wilderness of Midian, he comes to Mount Horeb. The 2 mountains, Horeb and Sinai, are often used interchangeably in the Hebrew Bible. While this story refers to Horeb, the signals are there for Sinai as well, as we will see. While there, something catches his eye. He sees a bush that is burning, but which does not seem to be consumed. This draws his attention. The fact that Moses notices this distinction means that he had likely been watching carefully, and likely for some time. As a shepherd working in a dry wilderness, Moses would have often seen bushes burning. So what made this one different and prompted him to turn aside? Interestingly, while the English describes a bush, in Hebrew the definite article is used, the bush, rather than a bush, which Jansen suggests may mean the site was already known by the local population to be sacred. Besides this, the Hebrew word for bush, seneh, closely resembles Sinai etymologically. The fact that seneh is repeated 4 times in just 2 verses suggests it is drawing the listener or reader to look forward in the story to the giving of the law at Sinai in chapter 20. In addition, fire in the ancient Near East was seen as a vehicle of the divine, and so provides another signal to the listener that something extraordinary is about to happen. What happens to Moses is often described by theologians as a theophany, from the Greek theophania, which is made up of 2 words, theos, God, and phainein, meaning to bring light or to cause to appear. Paul uses this word in Philippians 2:15 when he tells his listeners that if they live as innocent and blameless children of God in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, they will shine phainesthai, like stars in the world. A theophany describes the appearance of a divine entity to a human being, or, according to Wikipedia, it refers to the temporal and spatial manifestation of God in some tangible form. There are many such encounters described in the Hebrew Bible. God's appearance to Abraham and Sarah at the Oaks of Mamre in Genesis 18. The messenger who comes to Samson's mother in Judges 13 to announce the coming birth of Samson. This appearance to Moses, and the vision of the prophet Isaiah described in Isaiah 6, to name just a few. As in these other cases, Moses' encounter with God begins with a visual phenomenon. Samson's mother first sees an angel of God, then the message is delivered. Isaiah first sees the Lord high on his throne and the seraphim, then hears them calling to one another, "Holy, holy, holy," and only then does he hear God say, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" So here also Moses sees a fiery image and then hears a voice. Back to the story. When Moses looks closer, he sees an angel of the Lord. The English word angel is a translation of the Hebrew malach, meaning messenger. Once Moses turns aside to look at the bush, we are told, God calls out to him, "Moses, Moses," echoing God's call of Samuel in 1 Samuel 3:10, "Samuel, Samuel." Like Samuel and like Isaiah, Moses responds, "Here I am." The response conveys to the one who is called, "I'm paying attention. Go ahead." Paying attention is very important to seeing and to hearing. Attention is different than rationality, which we are so used to. Rationality makes presumptions about the world, while attention is a precondition for revelation. I'll say that again. Attention is different than rationality. Rationality makes presumptions about the world, while attention is a precondition for revelation. Attention is related to seeing, to mystery, and to the mystical. It also reflects an openness to the horizon, or to lifting one's eyes to the highest possibility of transformation, or the highest good. Attention sheds light on the darkness because we only see what we attend to. Is the whole world sacred or holy, and it's just our perception that changes? As Thomas Merton says, there is no way of explaining the realization that reality is filled with light, or of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. It has to be experienced. What are the conditions in general and in our own lives that beckon to us, draw us, draw us near, or open us up to the transcendent. When this happens, is this part of the way we are able to narrow our focus and know what we should attend to? As we have seen, the signals are clear that something important is about to happen. But just in case anyone missed them, the voice asks Moses to remove his shoes as he is on sacred ground. Now for the props. God now speaks to Moses as Yahweh, acknowledging awareness of the suffering of the Hebrew people. This four-letter name is a derivative of the three-letter Hebrew root Haya. Notice the difference. Notice the similarity. Root building on the root. So the one who has been known to Israel as the God of their fathers and mothers, Elohim, and I should have put the English Elohim on here too, but I didn't, reveals now for the first time to the characters in the story the special name Yahweh. This is not the first time the name appears in the biblical narrative, though. In Genesis 3, Yahweh Elohim is said to stroll through the Garden of Eden in the evenings. It is also the name given in Genesis 18, when three visitors or strangers appear to Abraham and Sarah near Hebron, and when later in the chapter, God debates with Abraham about whether or not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Because the pronunciation of God's name later came to be seen as profaning it, within the Jewish tradition, the term Adonai was substituted wherever Yahweh was found. English translations have followed this custom by substituting the Lord, a title which obscures the importance of the name in Hebrew. So wherever the English translates Lord in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, substitute Yahweh. Names are significant in the Tanakh or Hebrew Bible. We heard a few weeks ago about the change of Jacob's name given as a blessing to him by a messenger of God or God himself. His name changes from Yaakov, meaning supplanter, to Israel, one who wrestles Isra with God, El. In that case, the change in name is associated with the formation of Israel as a people, but it is also used as a descriptive for different manifestations of God in the Old Testament. El Shaddai, God of the mountain. El Olam, the Eternal One. El Elyon, the Most High God. Jacob then names the place of his encounter, Peniel, the face of God. Elohim is a plural version of El, but tends to be used in the singular to refer to God when not prefixed to another descriptive. Back to the story. God then informs Moses that he has plans to bring the people up out of the Nile Valley into Egypt into the higher country of what is today Palestine. She then drops the bombshell. It is Moses who will be confronting Pharaoh and who will be leading the people out of Egypt. Okay, so Moses has a couple of thoughts about this. First, he objects on the basis that he is not qualified for the job. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Verse 11. He's not sure he wants to do it. There could be a few reasons for this. There is that small problem that he recently fled Egypt after killing an Egyptian. So in agreeing to this call, he would be going back into the lion's den, so to speak. He might also be thinking, he has a good life in Midian. Why uproot his family and go back to Egypt to lead a group of escaped slaves out into the desert? Essentially, it's a thanks but no thanks. This diversionary tactic, however, doesn't have the effect Moses had hoped. God responds by assuring Moses that he will be with him, and the sign of that will be that once Moses has brought the people out, they will worship God on this very mountain. As Jansen says, Moses' fear and resistance to this call are not without basis. At other times, when God uses the phrase, "I will be with you" in the Old Testament, it is in circumstances where the danger to the leader is real and the risk of failure is significant. Examples would be Jacob fleeing Esau's wrath and Jeremiah's call as a prophet, which results in multiple threats to his life and significant time spent at the bottom of a cistern. Since this first objection doesn't work, Moses tries another approach, asking for ID. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what shall I tell them?" The voice responds, "I will be who I will be." This is what you are to say to the Israelites. "I will be has sent me to you." This time, God uses another tense of the verb, or of the word, though usually translated "I am" in English. A more appropriate translation here in this part would be, "I will be who I will be," which conveys more the sense of a dynamic God who is acting within history. And in Hebrew, the tense suggests the continuing present into the future. It also matches the sense conveyed in verse 12, "I will be with you," which refers to future events. As Jansen says, God's response constitutes a kind of refusal to answer rather than an answer, but only partly so. It also includes the sense of wait and see. What is to be has not yet been revealed. At a designated point in the future, the meaning of the name will become clear. This meaning will be revealed in that they will worship God here on this mountain, outside of Egypt, in the land of the Midianites. In our passage today, it is God's name that changes, initially identifying himself to Moses as Elohim, which we just talked about, the more general term for God. In the midst of the encounter, a new name is revealed, and Moses, a fugitive living in Midian, is now called by God to a pivotal task. God now supplants El, the name by which Moses' ancestors had known him, with Yahweh. Throughout this passage, Elohim and Yahweh are interwoven into the dialogue. Initially, God refers to God's self as Elohim to establish his identity, then later introduces Yahweh. I believe the intent of the narrator is to keep the two titles distinct, but also connect them, so that the reader can clearly see, one, that this God who is now speaking to Moses is the Elohim who has always been there, guiding Israel, and two, that there is a new name that this God wants to introduce. The essence is the same, but the change in name is significant. Just before I conclude, I want to read through the passage again using the Hebrew terms for God to show how they are woven into the account. I have replaced Israelites with descendants of Israel because I think it more accurately reflects the sons of Israel in Hebrew. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There an angel of Yahweh appeared to him in flames of fire from within the bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, "I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn." When Yahweh saw that he had gone over to look, Elohim called to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," the voice said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at Elohim. Yahweh said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them out of that land into a good and spacious land, flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the descendants of Israel has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the descendants of Israel, or Jacob, out of Egypt. But Moses said to Elohim, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the descendants of Israel out of Egypt? And Elohim said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship Elohim on this mountain. Moses said to Elohim, suppose I go to the descendants of Israel and say to them, the Elohim of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is the name? Then what shall I tell them? Elohim said to Moses, I will be who I will be. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I will be has sent me to you. Elohim also said to Moses, say to the descendants of Israel, Yahweh Elohim, and get both of those up here. All right. Yahweh Elohim. So now the two names are together. The Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. So pretty hard to get mixed up there. When you read it in the Hebrew, with the Hebrew names, you can see both how playful it is and also it's much easier to distinguish, because in English I find when it's just the Lord and God, it sounds very dry. So my Hebrew is not in as good a practice as it had been, but I was having a lot of fun reading through the Hebrew, and it's almost like the letters are playful and they jump off the page, and a lot of the rabbis, this is how they talk about these passages in the Old Testament Hebrew Bible. It's like the letters and the words are playing. There's a real playful sense in it. So I found this a lot of fun to do, and that's not a very climactic ending, but
Well, let's end with two songs. First, 118, In the Lord I'll Be Ever Thankful, and we'll sing that a couple of times, and then we'll turn over to 52, Come and Fill Our Hearts with Your Peace. So please rise, and then we will stay up for the benediction.
Thank you, and please at the end of the service, if you can help with the chairs and the books and the musical instruments, that would be wonderful. Like Moses, we are called by God to follow his instructions, to help others, to speak against injustice and inequity, to protect the world we live in and all creation. And like Moses, we do not go alone, but we go with the strength of God who calls us and sends us. So go from here knowing that God is with you.